Welcome back for our third video where we're going to implement a inventory where we can switch our weapons. So this is pretty exciting. I do apologize for how crazy the code will get in this, but it's really cool to see in action. So this is what we're going to be making. So without the inventory open, I have a sword. But then if I drag a spear over, it's going to equip the sword, and now I'll have the spear equipped. You can't drag out of the draggable box because it's already pretty much a hassle, and you can't reorder your inventory. But you can always just take anything and plop it in there, and then it will become the new weapon. So that's what we're going to create, and it's going to be pretty cool. So let's start by getting the sprites in order for us to do this. So we're going to need a new folder inside of sprites. So I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to call this UI. This is going to be all my UI related stuff. So I'm going to create a new sprite, and this is going to be my that equip like the inventory window. So I'm going to call this SPR underscore UI underscore inventory underscore back. So that's the back bar for the inventory window. And if we click on imports, there's in our assets folder, there's a UI set, and these are sprites created by the sprite artist Kenny, and he makes a lot of really cool sprites. So if you are looking for assets for UIs or just for stuff, if you just Google Kenny sprites, you'll probably find his webpage, and his stuff is freely available and really, really awesome to use. So what we want is this right here. It's a button, but we can repurpose it to be the background. So I want the long button. And I'm going to double its size because right now its size is not ideal. So I'm going to jump over to percentage and pop in 200. Going to leave the anchor on the top left, and that's all we need to do for this one. So next up is that little equip window I had. So we're going to create a new sprite, SPR underscore UI underscore, we'll call it inventory weapon. So, and actually, come to think of it, this sounds like the back equipped thing. So we'll just rename this to like regular old inventory. And this is going to be that little box for the weapon icon. So we're going to import, and we're going to pull this button square. And I'm also going to double its size. Now we need 3 sprites for the different weapons, so that they have little draggable icons. So I'm going to create another sprite, and this will be SPR underscore UI underscore sword, and that's the UI sprite for the sword. And that's going to be over inside of weapons. And there's a little like sword small thing. So we want to import this, yes, and then I'm going to also double its size. So 64 by 64. And leave the anchor where it is. Repeat the process. So create one for the spear, SPR underscore UI underscore spear, and import that spear. And then one more for the axe. And so this is SPR underscore UI underscore axe. And there's an axe right there. And I'm going to double its size. I mean, looking at it, I don't think I lined it up very well, but oh well, we can fix the sprite later if we ever want to. Maybe I'll fix it in the future. So we've got our sprites set up. Now we don't need objects for these because they're just going to be drawn via code. But we do need to add something new. And I'm going to do it inside the scripts. And we're going to set up basically, if you're familiar, it's an object, but it's going to be a struct. So it's essentially just a specialized data type for what we're going to do here. So we're going to create a new script, and I'm going to call this scr underscore item underscore struct. Now I'm going to give it a better name than this. So instead of this, I'm going to rename this to function item, capital I item, underscore name, comma, underscore UI sprites, comma, underscore weapon obj. Then we specify that this behaves as a constructor. And then our open curly braces. So we are essentially declaring what essentially are instance variables. You could go look up how GameMaker's the newer versions of GameMaker handle structs, and it's really, really, really powerful and a good way to store some complex data. So I'm just assigning all these input parameters. I don't know if you hear my cat licking me, but that's what that noise is. So I've declared all of these as basically instance variables is how they're going to behave. So we can now instantiate items using the new keyword as if they were objects. And that's going to be how we remember the linkage between the UI picture and the actual object inside of the game. So now time for kind of the what I would probably call the hard part. So let's jump over to the game manager, because this is where all of the action is going to happen. So we want to start adding the capabilities for us to have an inventory list. Now, I wouldn't declare the list as one of these type of variables, even though there is a data type for a list. I don't know if that comes across as the same type of list. So I'm going to declare it kind of the old way that GameMaker used to declare instance variables, and that's just by pulling up the create step. So this is going to declare my list. Now the beauty of this is so we're not doing a global variable. This is going to be an instance variable on the game manager, and the game manager is going to follow us from room to room. So we don't have to worry about if we come back into the starting room, this create triggering twice and wiping out our inventory, because that one, due to the way that we set up the room start, it won't persist. It will get deleted. So we'll only have the original one, which is pretty cool. Create a list for the inventory. I think I might have been saying array list just because I'm so used to Java and C, but GameMaker just calls it a list. So inventory equals ds for data structure underscore list underscore create. And then that creates a list data structure. Then I also want a variable called inventory underscore weapon, and that is currently set to none. And inventory weapon is going to be, what do I have equipped? So this is interfacing with the item. Both of these are going to deal with that item data type that we just created. All right. Let's throw some of these other ones. I'm trying to like, we could put them in variable definitions, but we can also, while we're here, we can just declare them here. So, well, let me think. Yeah, we probably do need to remember this in between states. So we need dragging. So this is variables related to drag and drop. So we need dragging, and that's going to be set to false. Dragged item index, and that's going to represent the item that we are currently dragging. So that's going to be related to the drag and drop stuff. Let's populate the list with some stuff. So to add things to the list, you do ds_list_add, and then you state the name of the list you want to add it to. So I want to add to inventory, and you state what you're adding. So I'm going to add a new item, and notice that it got keyworded because of what I coded. And it's going to be a sword. Its UI sprite is SPR UI sword, and the game object that's associated with it is OBJ sword. Oops, OBJ weapon sword, I believe. Yeah. And so we're going to do this for all of my weapons. Now, we can make it so that we pick them up down the road, but that honestly is a trivial amount of work compared to this. Because the list will expand as we add new things to it, so this will work relatively smoothly. Now I need one more closing parenthesis here. So in contrast to an array, the advantage is that it is going to dynamically resize, delete. Technically, we could reposition things pretty well inside of it too. And then X. All right, so that's going to insert all of my things to the list. Now, I really can't see it yet because we still have a lot of code to do before we can even render our list. And then let's also just equip something to the player. And actually what we need is, what do I think? Inventory weapon. I guess we could just reference it from there. So equip the item 0 to the player. So it'll just say inventory weapon equals inventory. Now you can't really, like, it would be really cool if you could reference it like an array like that, but you actually can't. You kind of can. You have to put a vertical bar right there. That's the OR symbol, but just a single one of them. And that's how GameMaker handles accessors. It's like the shorthand accessor. So it's the brackets as if it were an array, and then a single vertical bar, and then the index that you want. So normally this is going to be I if we're in the context of a for loop, but I just want to equip the 0th item. And I'm going to run ds_list_delete. And that's going to take out that item from the front of the list because we equipped it. It's now inside of my other, I'm keeping track of it inside of inventory weapon. Now, we will want to tell the player, there goes my cat. Hi, Cujo. We'll want to tell the player to look for their weapon with this inventory weapon command. So let's go over to player real quick. And you can see that player is just directly using object weapon axe. But let's reference it out of the manager. So global.manager dot inventory weapon dot weapon obj. And that will reference the currently equipped weapons object reference. We can test this, and it should work. The list doesn't do anything right now. It just creates the list, but we should still have my sword. So if we really wanted to prove to ourselves that the list is truly working, we can always swap out which item we equipped. Like we could just switch this to 1 real fast, and we can see that it's going to take the spear, put the spear, quote, in my hands, and then when I attack, it's going to spawn the spear. All right, so that's good. That means our list is working and our data structure is working. So that's good. Now we need a way to visualize our list. So some kind of inventory screen. And then we're going to have to implement some kind of drag and drop for that inventory. I guess I'm going to do one more command before I forget. Technically, during cleanup, you're supposed to erase the list so that you don't leak memory. But I don't think this matters because the only time that this list should, or the only time this is going to happen is when you close the game, because the game manager probably shouldn't be getting deleted. But if the game manager does get deleted, we probably should release the memory. All right, so that's looking good. So where we want to head next is we want to get a visual of my items. So I want to create a new event for the draw GUI step. So the difference between draw and draw GUI, draw is going to draw just going to draw a sprite to the screen, and it will, well, they both replace the existing sprite. So, but draw GUI will guarantee that it's on top. And also, it draws it relative to the viewport rather than relative to the room. So it's always going to be in these absolutes. If I say 100 pixels, it's 100 pixels in from the edge of the screen, not position 100 in the room. So the draw GUI is better if you have a camera like we do that follows the player around. All right, well, let's throw one more variable in here. We're going to need a button that, or a variable that tells us if we're looking at my inventory. So I want to add a variable called UI underscore show inventory. And this is going to be a type Boolean. And this is going to be how I know if I have my inventory open or not. So we could do things like prevent the player from moving and attacking while you have your inventory open. GameMaker is a little bit of hassle to like implement a game pause, but you could use this as the beginning of setting up some kind of pause functionality. All right, so if we are in the UI underscore show inventory, then we're going to actually show our inventory. So the weapon slot location is going to be just this var UI inventory weapon X 100 and var UI inventory weapon Y 100. Then we're going to draw like the background. Oh, I have another cat on my lap now. Okay, that's my screen. No. All right, fine, you can sit there. She has other ideas of what I'm doing in this video. All right, sorry about that. The cats are distracting, and they block the exhaust fans on my computer. So, completely broke my train of thought there. So, drawing the backing bar, this is going to be the bar. This is just that little button thing for the inventory slot. So draw the weapon background, I guess. So that is SPR underscore UI weapon, sprite index 0, spawning in at my incredibly horribly named variable X, my incredibly horribly named variable Y. Sorry, I like long variable names. Because I actually believe it's like self-commenting your code. And then we'll draw the currently equipped weapon. So we'll do another call to draw sprite. Now inventory represents our list. Well, actually, no, we don't want the list. We want inventory weapon. That, remember, that's the struct of my stuff. So I want to access the variable on it called UI sprite, index 0, and the same tragically named variables, but I want to offset it by about 16. So this will show a box that has the currently equipped weapon on there. Let's go through and implement the ability to show this inventory so we can verify that this code works before moving on to the next step. So I'm going to jump over to begin step real fast, and I'm going to, oh, hi Hammy, you've returned. And then I'm going to add underneath here if keyboard underscore check underscore pressed the key I, then UI underscore this is inside Game Manager. UI show inventory is equal to the opposite of what it currently is. I hope I spelled that right. Oh, that's fine. That warning always just... And then I like to be able to exit the inventory by just hitting escape. So if I press escape, I just want it to always set the show inventory to false. So keyboard underscore check underscore pressed VK escape. And then that would be show UI show inventory is equal to false. It will just immediately exit out of showing our inventory. Comments are always good to add. Okay, so if we hit play and we hit I, we should see an inventory, or not. Let's see, begin step. Oh, my pruning of the unnecessary curly braces has betrayed me. All right, so if I press I, nothing happens. Well, that's disappointing. Let's see. That looks fine. Oh, I forgot the most important step. Now the game manager needs to be visible because it is going to be showing an inventory. Now it doesn't have a sprite anyway, so it's not a big deal, but make sure you turn this thing back to visible because otherwise we can't see it. And there's my wonderful sword. Now I can't do anything with it yet, but hey, we've got my currently equipped weapon showing there. That's something. Okay, so good so far. And if that doesn't work, check, review kind of the past stuff in the video, and then we can try to try to fix it there. Okay, so now we want to draw the rest of my inventory. So that's going to happen next. I like my big fancy comments. Okay, so draw the rest of the inventory. So we do need some variables to remember where we're drawing this at. So UI X, maybe 200, UI Y 100, so it's level with the other one. And this is the location of the inventory list. Next up is to actually draw it. So that's just going to be a simple call to draw sprites, SPR underscore I inventory, sprite 0, UI X, and UI Y. And so that should be pretty happy. Then we want to create the positions for where we want to draw each of the weapons. And this is where we're going to draw each weapon. So var weapon X, maybe I could call it UI weapon. I do love my long variable names. UI weapon equals UI X plus 16. I'm offsetting it inwards by 16. Var UI underscore weapon X equals UI X plus 16. Kind of a padding of 16 on both sides. And then the spacing. And we'll put 64 units in between each of those. Now, we could be a little bit fancier and hope that they're all the same unit. And actually, I probably should just hard code it to 64. But we could also just read the size of a sprite. So like we could read the size of one of these sprites and hope they're all the same size. Or we can just manually hard code it to be 64. I'm fine with manually hard coding it to be 64. So we're now going to loop through our inventory and draw each item. So this is going to be a standard for loop. So for var I equals 0, while I is less than, now here's how you get the length of a list. ds list underscore size, and then you specify the size of your list, and then I++. Then we're going to grab a reference, just so I don't have to sit there typing inventory brackets I a bunch. So we'll just call this item equals inventory bracket. I wonder if I can, no, that's not. Bracket bar I. And so that's going to reference the ith item and just turn that into just a simple variable called item. And then we'll draw it. So draw sprite item dot UI sprite. Remember that item is the struct. So comma 0, comma weapon, UI weapon X. Now we should account for the offset of the spacing, so plus I times weapon spacing. And then Y doesn't have any offsets, so this will just be UI underscore weapon Y. And so that should draw us our inventory. Then the only thing we have left to do is implement the drag and dropping. And really that's going to be like about 3 if statements of some complexity. All right, so if we hit play. Now you should get the rest of your inventory showing up here. Can't drag them yet. but we still have, we have some pretty good progress on this. So now we could put this inside of step, or we could put this inside of draw GUI. It's, half a dozen, 6 of the other. So I think I messed up that expression. I guess we'll just put it inside of draw GUI. So if the mouse check button pressed, and we're looking for MB underscore left, so we click the left mouse button. So we want to check to see if this is inside of one of my items. And that's kind of where this is a little bit of a hassle to compute. And I suppose, do I want to put it? Yeah, it's a control-based thing, so I probably should put it in a step, but we'll see if we can manage it here. So this same for loop, we can actually just copy and paste it from here. So we want to loop through all of our things to see if it clicked on one of them. So again, this is where it gets a little bit messy. So let's grab a reference. So var item equals inventory bracket bar I. Now we want to get the item's position. And what stinks is some of this is, inside of an if statement, so it's out of scope. So maybe I'm just going to take this, put it up here, so that it is within the scope of my next method, or my next if statement. That will actually simplify some of what I have to do here. Although, unfortunately, I guess I can still see it. All right, so we need to figure out the box that is around the item. So that's going to be item underscore rectangle. I'm going to just call it item rect equals. So basically this is going to be an array where we list out essentially x1, y1, which is the top left, and then x2 and y2, which is the bottom right. So the top left would actually just be the current position of the item. So we could just use this. Actually, we could just steal that. Because it's going to be the x plus any sort of offsetting based on the spacing. And then the y would be pretty much the same. And then the bottom would be 64 because it's a 64 by 64. So we would actually take this same stuff and just add 64 to it. So maybe we could have a variable here called we could just use weapon spacing. It is the same thing, so I don't know if we need to have another variable for the same exact thing. So it's going to be the same thing here, but plus weapon sprite size. So you can kind of see how we got to that. Okay, so that calculates that. Then check to see if the click was within that box. If point in rectangle, so this is going to return true or false. And to get the mouse, we have to do device underscore mouse underscore x underscore 2 GUI 0. You can read up about how this method works, but essentially what it does is it gets the in GUI space the position of the mouse, not in world space, and that's important. And then we just kind of go through and feed at rect 0, comma, rect 1, comma, rect 2, comma, rect 3. Make sure I have the right number of closing curly braces here. I think it would be 2, which I do. I gotta look up closer on the screen here. Oh, I'm missing a comma. All right. So that looks good. So if we did click it, we want to set dragging to true. And then we're going to set dragged item index to I, and then break. So remember, basically we're remembering the thing we clicked on. And I know that's quite a chunky bit of code, but I did kind of warn us that this will be a little bit crazy. All right, so now let's handle the dragging. So let's see. What we want to do with the dragging is we want to show the item following the mouse cursor around. So if we are dragging and the button is currently being held down, mouse check button, this MB left. This is the one that returns true if you're currently holding the mouse down. And the else case is actually going to be pretty simple. They released the mouse, and we'll set dragging to false and the dragged item index to -1. So if you release the mouse, then that will happen. But if you're dragging and the current index is not -1, then we're going to draw the new thing. So let's get a reference to the item. So var item equals inventory, bracket bar, dragged item index. And then we're going to draw the sprite. So we're going to draw it following the mouse. Draw underscore sprites, item.UI sprite, index 0. And then we've got to use that, let's break this up into 2 separate lines. This is going to be X and that's going to be Y. We're going to change that in a second. Var position X is device underscore mouse X to GUI minus the width of the sprite. Sprite get width. Well, I mean, realistically, we do know that it is going to be 64. So we just have to make sure that, divided by 2. So we just have to make sure that that stays kind of uniform, that all of our inventory images are 64 by 64. And then we can just use this position X and position Y here. So we can test this, and the dragging does nothing except for show us an item. But that's still good, and that's still good for us to see. So here's kind of the code that I added after rendering the inventory. So if you need to check, this would be where you'd come back to to see if there is a typo or not. So I'll hit play. And now when I pop up my inventory, I crash, which, is good. Rect was not set before reading. Dang, I made a mistake. Oh, what was called item rect. I do hate making mistakes like that. All right, so let's try it again. So when I push I, inventory shows up, and I can drag around the thing, different things. Now, I do want to make it so that the thing I'm dragging turns into like a ghost version of it, so that the player knows that they're like in the process of moving it. So we would change that up here. So when we draw the sprite, if I is equal to the dragged item index, then we want to use draw sprite extended. So we're going to use draw sprite extended. And extended requires us to specify an X scale, which is 1, a Y scale, which is 1, a rotation, which is 0, a color tint, and an alpha. But alpha is the one we want. So we'll do 0.5 on that so that it will kind of slightly fade it. So you can see that when I'm dragging this, it fades the original copy. We're getting there. We've got one more if statement to process, and then it should be completely functional. So the final if statement is if they drop it into place. Then we want to equip it. So that will be if dragging and the mouse button is not being held down. Mouse check button. I kind of haven't had a chance to refactor my code a whole lot. I think you could potentially do button released. I'll try it, and if it doesn't work, I'll switch it back. So we'll do mouse check button released, because that's a little bit more better. So if we release it, Well, we need to start kind of seeing if it was within the target area. So first up, let's get our item. So we're going to get a reference to the item again. And then check to see if we dropped it inside of the equip window. So if, and we're going to use point in rectangle again here. Point in rectangle. The points that we want to do are device underscore mouse underscore X to GUI and device mouse Y to GUI. Then now the positions that we want. So I'm going to start doing this on a new line. So this is the upper left X position of that, which would be this. Oh, actually, wouldn't it be this thing? Oops. Don't need that whole thing. No, nothing's gonna make those that red go away. So much red everywhere. Inventory weapon Y. And then we want to include that offset on it. So we're going to use these two same things again, but with plus weapons bright size. Maybe plus 16 to give it a little bit of leeway. So like I said, that's a pretty monstrous if statement. So if that's true that we dropped it there, we want to go through our equip process. So we're going to take our old weapon, put it back into the inventory. So that will just be ds underscore list add inventory. That's the name of the list. And then inventory weapon, because that's the thing that's about to get replaced. So then we replace the equipped weapon. And that would be inventory underscore weapon equals item, because we grabbed that reference. And then so then we just delete it from the list. ds underscore list underscore delete from the list inventory, and we want to delete dragged item index. Then we are done, and so we can then say dragging equals false, and dragged item index goes back to -1. So let's test this and see if it works. Let me get the code back on the screen here. So this is the code that we just added. So let's hit play. So I've got my sword. Ooh. Maybe this does have to be and not being held. No. Oh, I probably computed something wrong here. Item. So I don't think it's triggering this if statement properly. Well, that's not pleasant. I misspelled something. So I guess the first thing for debugging this is to show debug message and see if we are getting inside of the correct area. So we're watching to see down here if it says dropped. And it's not. So it's not picking up where it needs to be. So it's not picking up the correct position here. So what could be wrong here? Maybe we should just make this based off of the sprite size. So we could do sprite gets width SPR that, and then we'll do get height. So it's still just not getting into that. Oh, I think I need to move this before the other code. That's what it is. Because I think the other one was overriding the behavior. So that's interesting. So now you can see that we've got our weapons capable of switching. Although annoyingly, when I click the mouse to attack it, like to drag the item, it also, as you can see, causes that my attack to happen. So we could just prevent the player's attack if we go over here with global left pressed, and we could say if attack enabled and global.manager UI show inventory, and then put a not in front of it so that if that's not true. So that way we don't attack while we have the inventory open. So when we push I can still move, but I can't attack while the inventory is open. And there we have it. We now have a functional drag and drop equipable inventory. And I know this video is kind of long, but that was a bit of a monster for us to put together. And so if you have any trouble with the code, just check the description for the finished code, because this was an incredible amount of code. So Thank you for watching, and in the next video, we'll add a ranged attack and potentially explore adding a right-click effect to some of the weapons. See you then.